Hey everyone, I'm Logan, and I've got a story to share that's deeply personal and terrifying. It's about a night that started with romance and ended in horror. It involves me, a 16-year-old, and my best friend Georgia, who's 28. We've been friends for years, and over time, my feelings for her grew from simple friendship into something more profound. I wanted to make a grand romantic gesture, so I planned a proposal like no other. The idea was to take her to an old, supposedly haunted house that I had heard about. I thought it would be the perfect setting for a memorable proposal. We arrived at the house just before midnight, around 12 a.m. The night was clear, and the house looked intriguing yet welcoming. I was filled with excitement and nervous anticipation. This was supposed to be a night we'd both remember forever. As we approached the house, everything seemed calm and ordinary. The air was cool, and the moonlight cast eerie but beautiful shadows on the old walls. We walked up the creaky front steps and entered the house. The interior was dusty, but nothing unusual. I could see Georgia was impressed by the setting. We explored the ground floor, which had a vintage charm with its old furniture and creaky wooden floors. I was planning to propose upstairs, where the ambiance was more private. As the clock struck 6 p.m., a strange change came over the house. We heard a series of metallic clinks and suddenly noticed that the doors were locking themselves. First, the garden door we used to enter slammed shut and locked. Then we heard similar noises from the other doors. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. We tried the doors, but they wouldn't budge. Our excitement quickly turned to dread. We had no choice but to explore further inside. To our relief, front door was still open, so we hurriedly stepped inside, hoping it would be our way out if things got worse. But as soon as we entered, the front door slammed shut and locked behind us. We were stuck in the house with no immediate way out. Trying to keep calm, I suggested we go upstairs. I wanted to propose to Georgia in a room that was private and special. We made our way up the creaky stairs, and the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Every step seemed to echo through the house, adding to the growing sense of unease. We reached the upstairs room, and as we entered, the door behind us shut with an ominous thud, trapping us once again. The room was unlike the rest of the house. It had a large, old bed covered in dust, a small bathroom, and a tiny kitchenette. The room was cluttered with old, neglected items and thick layers of grime. The sight of the dust-covered furniture and cobwebs only added to our discomfort. As we looked around, something horrifying happened. We noticed a dark stain seeping from beneath the bed. At first, we thought it might be a spilled bottle or some old liquid, but when I checked, my heart nearly stopped. It was blood. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks. Our instincts screamed that we needed to get out. I kicked at the door, hoping it would open. With a loud crash, it swung open, and we fled from the room, our hearts pounding with fear. We raced out of the house, running back to my place. We were scared, confused, and deeply shaken by what we had just experienced. The next day, despite our terror, we decided to return to the house. We wanted to see if anything had changed, or if we could make sense of what happened. To our astonishment, the house looked perfectly normal. There was no trace of the blood, and sunlight streamed in through the windows, giving the place a completely different feel. We searched every corner of the house. Everything was in order. The rooms were dusty, but there were no signs of the horror we had encountered the night before. We tried to convince ourselves that it was just a figment of our imagination, a trick of the mind in a state of fear. Yet, the haunting memories of the previous night lingered, and we couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. As we were leaving, something even more disturbing caught our eye. The house now had a new, white lock on the door. We inquired about it and were told that the house had been locked like that for a long time. We were baffled. The lock was completely new to us, and its sudden appearance felt like a cruel joke. We couldn't make sense of why the lock was there, or how it related to our terrifying experience. It was as if the house was hiding something from us, and we were never meant to uncover its secret. The entire experience left us haunted and confused. So what do you think happened? Was it all just a bizarre series of events, or did we encounter something supernatural? I can't deny that the events of that night felt real and terrifying. Georgia and I are still trying to make sense of it all. And every time we think back to that night, a shiver runs down our spines. The house, with its new lock and strange occurrences, remains a mystery. It's a chilling reminder of that night and the unsettling events that unfolded. If you have any theories or thoughts about what we experienced, please share them in the comments. Let's try to unravel this mystery together. Story 2, Airbnb. Hello everyone, my name is David, and today I want to share a spine-chilling experience that I had with my dear friend Ella. Ella, who is 22 years old, and I at 21 were in desperate need of a break from our hectic lives. We came across an old Airbnb listing for a secluded house in Evergreen, Colorado. The listing promised a serene retreat with vintage charm and breathtaking views of the surrounding forest. It seemed like the perfect escape, so we decided to book it. The booking process was surprisingly smooth. We were excited about the adventure that awaited us, unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. As we finalized our plans, the only thing that seemed slightly odd was the house's history. It was rumored to be haunted. But we brushed off these thoughts, thinking it was just local lore. We arrived at the house in the late afternoon. The mansion was set atop a hill, surrounded by towering pines. It looked straight out of a Gothic novel, covered in ivy with a grand front porch and a weathered appearance. The setting sun cast long shadows, giving the house an ominous feel. Despite the uneasy atmosphere, we were thrilled about our getaway. Inside, the house was filled with antique furniture, old paintings, and dusty chandeliers. The decor was charming yet neglected, with cobwebs in the corners and a musty smell lingering in the air. As we explored, we couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but we attributed it to the house's age and our overactive imaginations. That night, we tried to settle in, but the house seemed to come alive with strange noises. Creaks, groans, and whispering sounds filled the air. We decided to investigate and found ourselves drawn to the attic. The space was dark and cluttered with old furniture covered in white sheets. The atmosphere was heavy with dust, and the temperature dropped significantly. In the far corner of the attic, we discovered an ornate mirror covered by a dusty cloth. As soon as we uncovered it, the air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder. Shadows danced behind us in the mirror's surface. We quickly covered the mirror and returned to our room, but the sense of dread remained. The noises continued, and sleep eluded us. In the early hours of the morning, we couldn't ignore the eerie feeling that something was terribly wrong. The mirror seemed to be the focal point of our unease. We tried to ignore it, but the shadows and whispers became increasingly unsettling. Determined to get to the bottom of it, we decided to return to the attic. The mirror was uncovered once more, and the room felt even colder. The shadows in the mirror grew darker and more pronounced, and the whispers turned into frantic murmurs. We felt as though something malevolent was watching us. But before we could react, the temperature dropped even further, and a feeling of intense fear overwhelmed us. The next day, desperate for a break from the oppressive atmosphere of the house, we decided to explore the nearby forest. We wandered deeper into the woods and stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. The cabin was falling apart. Broken windows, a rotting door, and an eerie silence surrounded it. Inside, we found a large, leather-bound book, covered in strange symbols. The book's pages were filled with unsettling rituals and incantations. We felt a chill run down our spines as we examined the book. We decided to leave it where we found it, and hurried back to the mansion, hoping the fresh air would lift our spirits. Upon returning to the mansion, we were shocked to find that the front door, which had been securely locked, was now slightly ajar. The interior of the house felt different. Items were out of place, and the room seemed colder and more foreboding. The once comfortable mansion now felt like a prison. The mirror in the attic was uncovered again. The air was suffocating, and the shadows in the mirror seemed to reach out towards us. The whispers grew louder, almost as if the house itself was trying to communicate something dark and sinister. Our sense of dread intensified, and we felt as though we were being drawn into something malevolent. As night fell, the house became increasingly hostile. The atmosphere grew thick with fear as lights flickered, doors slammed shut on their own, and the air became unbearably heavy. Strange noises echoed through the mansion. Crashes, footsteps, and a constant hum of whispers. In a state of panic, we decided to leave. However, the front door was locked again, and we couldn't force it open. Desperate, we broke a window and escaped into the dark forest. We ran until we found a road and called for help. Our hearts pounded as we awaited the arrival of the authorities. When the authorities arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the property. They found no evidence of disturbances, and the house appeared to be in perfect condition. The mirror was intact, and the door was securely locked. We were perplexed, unable to explain the horrors we had witnessed. Despite their inspection, we couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. We reviewed the photos we had taken in the forest and noticed faint, ghostly figures and symbols in the background. It was as though the forest and the house were connected in some dark, inexplicable way. Following morning, the house looked pristine. There were no signs of the previous night's terrors. We checked out, relieved to leave but haunted by what we had experienced. The final twist came when we learned that the house had been closed for years due to similar, unexplained phenomena. Our brief stay at the house had exposed us to something dark and ancient. The house at Whispering Pines remained a mystery, with its true nature hidden from the world. We left with a profound sense of unease, realizing that some places are best left unexplored, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. If you have any thoughts or theories about what we experienced, please share them in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on this haunting adventure. Story 3 McDonald's. It was a chilly Friday night in Denver, Colorado. Nathan, a 28-year-old software developer, and Laura, 22-year-old student, had always enjoyed exploring the city's hidden gems. On this particular night, Nathan had invited Laura for a late-night snack at an old McDonald's, rumored to be one of the oldest in the area. Nathan had heard whispers about the restaurant being haunted, but he shrugged it off as urban legends. He wanted to test his courage and see if the rumors held any truth. Laura, intrigued and a bit skeptical, agreed to join him. They arrived at the McDonald's around midnight. The neon sign flickered, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. The restaurant was closed, but the lights were on inside, which was odd since they had not seen any cars in the parking lot. Nathan and Laura pushed the door open, which creaked loudly. Inside, the restaurant looked frozen in time. Furniture was old, the walls were covered with peeling wallpaper, and the air was thick, with an unsettling silence. They noticed that the place had not been cleaned in years. Dust covered the tables and chairs, and a strange smell lingered in the air. Laura shivered as they walked past the empty booths, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "Let's get out of here," Laura suggested, but Nathan, eager to prove the ghost stories wrong, insisted they explore a bit more. As they reached the back of the restaurant, Nathan noticed a door marked "Employees Only." He hesitated, but eventually decided to open it. Inside, the room was filled with old kitchen equipment and storage supplies, all coated in a thick layer of dust. Suddenly, they heard a faint noise coming from the basement. It sounded like someone, or something, scratching against the walls. Laura's heart raced as Nathan took out his flashlight, and they descended the creaky stairs into the basement. The basement was even creepier than the main floor. Old boxes were stacked haphazardly, and the air was damp. The scratching noise grew louder as they ventured deeper. Nathan shone the flashlight around, revealing old McDonald's uniforms and expired food products. Laura's unease grew, but Nathan seemed more determined than ever. As they reached the far end of the basement, they saw a small, old door partially ajar. The scratching noise had stopped, replaced by a low, menacing hum. Nathan, with a mix of curiosity and bravado, pushed the door open. Inside was a room filled with old restaurant memorabilia, including a vintage cash register and a creepy clown statue. Laura was about to voice her discomfort when the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening bang. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness. Nathan fumbled with his flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. Panic set in as Laura's breath quickened. "I think we should leave now," Laura said, her voice trembling. Nathan agreed, but as they turned to leave, they found the door to the basement stairs locked. They were trapped. Nathan and Laura pounded on the door, but no one answered. The hum they had heard earlier grew louder and seemed to come from the walls themselves. The basement began to feel like it was closing in on them. In the dim glow of Nathan's dying flashlight, they noticed old photographs on the wall. showing the McDonald's in its prime with smiling staff and However, in each photo, a shadowy figure stood in the background, watching. As they frantically searched for another way out, Laura noticed something written on the wall in chalk. Beware the clown's curse. She had heard about the curse from local legends, but never took it serious. The realization that they were in the midst of a cursed location sent chills down her spine. Their situation grew dire as the hum turned into a deafening roar. Shadows danced around them, and the temperature dropped sharply. Laura clung to Nathan, trying to stay calm. Suddenly, the room's lights flickered back on, and they saw the clown statue from earlier standing in the doorway. Its eyes seemed to follow them, and it was clear that the statue was more than just a decoration. It was alive. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Nathan and Laura hurled themselves against the door, finally breaking it open. They scrambled up the basement stairs, pushed open the door, and fled into the night. The following day, Nathan and Laura returned to the McDonald's, hoping to find a reasonable explanation for the night's event. To their shock, the restaurant was completely boarded up and looked as though it had been abandoned for decades. There was no sign of the basement or the door they had used. Laura and Nathan were left with unanswered questions. The experience had shaken them deeply, and they couldn't explain what had happened. They knew they had encountered something supernatural, and the haunted McDonald's would forever be a chilling memory. Story 4: Cabin Girl. Hey everyone, it's Emma here. Let me take you on a journey to a place that was supposed to be a serene escape, ended up being a nightmare. I had been working non-stop in Seattle, and all I wanted was a break. I stumbled upon a cabin rental in the Cascade Mountains called Whispering Pines. It promised breathtaking views, rustic charm, and tranquility. The reviews were mixed, but I was drawn to its old-world appeal and the promise of solitude. Ignoring the vague warnings and unusual history mentioned in the reviews, I decided to book it. The drive to the cabin was long, winding, and isolated. As I neared my destination, the dense forest enveloped the car in a green haze. The cabin appeared through the trees, its rustic charm exactly as advertised. It was a beautiful, two-story wooden structure with a large porch and a picturesque view of the mountain. The air was crisp, and the setting sun bathed everything in a warm, golden glow. I felt a wave of relief and excitement, convinced this would be the perfect getaway. Inside, the cabin was even more charming. Wooden floors creaked beneath my feet, and the stone fireplace crackled with the warmth of a welcoming fire. The furnishings were antique. Every piece seemed to tell a story. It felt cozy and inviting. I spent the first evening unpacking, exploring the nooks and crannies of the cabin, and enjoying a quiet dinner by the fire. Everything seemed perfect. The first night passed without incident, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, an eerie silence fell over the cabin. The wind howled through the trees, causing the house to groan and creak. I brushed it off as the house settling. However, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard what sounded like footsteps coming from the attic. I chalked it up to my imagination and decided to investigate in the morning. Following day was beautiful, sunshine and clear skies. I spent most of it exploring the surrounding forest and enjoying the solitude. As night fell, however, the cabin took on a different atmosphere. The wind picked up, and the house seemed to come alive with strange noises. I was in the middle of a relaxing bath when I heard those same footsteps from the attic again, followed by soft whispers. I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and ascended the narrow staircase to the attic. The door was slightly ajar, and the temperature dropped noticeably as I stepped inside. The attic was filled with old, dusty furniture and boxes. The whispers grew louder, and I noticed strange symbols on the walls, symbols that hadn't been there before. I felt a chill run down my spine. The flashlight flickered, and shadows seemed to move on their own. I quickly retreated, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. By midnight, the atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension. A loud bang from the attic jolted me awake. I grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding, and went upstairs. The attic was colder than before, and the symbols on the walls had changed. Some were now glowing faintly. The whispers were now replaced by loud, disjointed voices. I saw a dark figure moving in the shadows. When I shone the flashlight toward it, Figure vanished. My flashlight died, plunging the room into darkness. I felt an icy presence and had to get out immediately. Panicked, I ran downstairs and tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. I had no cell service and was completely isolated. Desperate, I searched for a landline and found an old rotary phone in the kitchen. I dialed 911, explaining my situation as best as I could. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way. The whispers and footsteps continued, making the wait excruciating. I felt trapped, scared, and alone. Eventually, the police arrived. They conducted a thorough search of the cabin but found nothing out of the ordinary. No signs of disturbance or anything unusual in the attic. They reassured me that the noises were likely just the house settling. They offered to escort me back to Seattle, which I accepted, though still shaken. The officers were polite, but seemed somewhat skeptical about my claims. Back in Seattle, I tried to forget the experience, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Whispering Pines was removed from the rental site shortly after my departure. The cabin remains a haunting memory, a reminder that sometimes a seemingly perfect escape can harbor dark and disturbing secrets. To this day, I wonder about the true nature of Whispering Pine. Was it just an old house with quirks, or was something more sinister lurking in its shadows? Story 5. Hey everyone, my name is Nathan, and today I'm going to share with you a story that has haunted me since childhood. It's a story about how a simple, everyday curiosity turned into a chilling mystery. The events took place in the quiet suburban town of Greenville, South Carolina. So grab a seat and get comfortable, because this is a story that still gives me chills. When I was about 7 years old, my family moved to a charming little house in Greenville. It was a perfect neighborhood, filled with friendly faces and lush green lawns. But there was one house in particular that always caught my attention. It was directly across the street from ours, and I would often stare at it from our front window. There was something odd about that house. The windows were always covered with thick, dark curtains, and I rarely saw anyone coming or going. But what really fascinated me were the small, shadowy figures that seemed to dart past the curtains. I remember asking my mom about it, but she always brushed it off, saying it was probably just the play of light and shadow. As months went by, my curiosity about the house only grew stronger. I'd often daydream about who lived there and what their lives might be like. I imagined everything from friendly neighbors to secretive spies. My imagination ran wild, and the house became a sort of enigma to me. One summer day, when I was feeling particularly adventurous, I decided to investigate. I told my mom I wanted to go explore the neighborhood, and she reluctantly agreed. I walked over to the mysterious house, my heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. To my surprise, the front door of the house was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open just a crack. The door creaked, and I peered inside. The interior was shrouded in dust and cobwebs. It was clear that no one had lived there for a long time. I felt a mix of disappointment and relief. I was about to leave when I heard a noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like something or someone moving around. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate further. I tiptoed up the creaky staircase and reached the top. At the end of the hallway, I found a door that was slightly open. I pushed it open and found myself in a small, dusty room filled with old furniture covered in sheets. There was a large, ornate mirror against one wall, and a single chair in the center of the room. But what caught my eye was a large, old-fashioned chest sitting in the corner. It was locked with a rusty padlock. My heart raced as I wondered what might be inside. I tried to open it, but it was firmly shut. Just as I was about to leave, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from behind me. I spun around to see a shadowy figure in the doorway. It was a tall, thin man with a gaunt face. His eyes were dark and hollow, and he had an eerie, unsettling smile on his face. I froze in fear. The man didn't say a word, just stared at me with those haunting eyes. I backed away slowly, trying to make my escape. As I turned to leave, I glanced back one last time and saw the man slowly fading away into the shadows. I ran out of the house as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed back home and told my mom what had happened. She listened carefully and then took me to the local library to do some research about the house. It turned out that the house had been abandoned for years after the previous owner, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, passed away. According to local records, he had lived alone for many years and had been a reclusive figure. It was said that he had no family, and the house had fallen into disrepair after his death. Over the years, I would occasionally hear strange noises coming from the abandoned house. Some of the neighbors claimed to have seen strange lights or heard footsteps. The house became something of a local legend, with stories of ghosts and hauntings spreading through Greenville. Despite all the eerie occurrences, I never saw the shadowy figure again. The house remained empty, and eventually it was demolished to make way for new developments. But the memories of that day stayed with me, and the shadowy figure in the window became a haunting reminder of the mysteries that sometimes lie just beyond our understanding.